Welcome to the Sports Dép Podcast. Joey Alfieri, Simon Tsalikis. Not an emergency episode. It's not an emergency because we knew Kent Hughes was going to speak today. We could not get to the studio in time to record this, so we wanted to record it from parts unknown on my end and parts sort of known. Simon usually has the same background, like 75% of the time. But how about this one, Simon? You see this? You see this jersey?
What is that? Alfieri.
You like that one?
Is that the retired jersey in Huntsic Carcherville?
Yeah, one of one, man. One of one.
What?
I might sign it for you. But very interesting episode of the podcast coming up. Obviously, Kent Hughes met members of the media today, and we'll go over some of the things that he had to say. It was nice to see Patrick Laine skate on his own. Caden Gooley joined the group, so it looks like Gooley's close. Why don't we start there, Simon? Because that was kind of there wasn't really anything like earth-shattering that came out of this press conference for me. But he did mention a couple times, Ken Hughes did, that they're going to be very prudent. They're going to be very cautious with Caden Gooley's return and with Kirby Dach's return, because they said Kirby Dach, the injury is to the leg, the same leg that his knee that he tore up is on. So they want to be very careful with that. And Caden Gooley, obviously, the injuries have kind of mounted here over the last little while. He's gonna start to be pegged as an injury-prone player too if he can't stay healthy. And I really like the player, so I'm hoping that he can figure it out and stay healthy. But how about those comments? Very cautious with the return of those two guys.
I think you have to be with Caden Gooley, and the good thing, Kirby Dach as well. But look, you've built up all this these points. You put yourself in a nice spot that you're not chasing down. Although it is very, very tight. One bad week for you, one good week for the team that's sitting in the 9th spot or the 4th spot in the Atlantic Division can be all the difference. But you've bought yourself a little bit of time, and you don't want to label these guys as injury prone. But Joey, if I asked you and I asked our subscribers here and our listeners, who are the two most injury prone players on the Canadiens in August, September? Unfortunately, we would put Kirby Dach and Caden Gooley's name on that list, and it sucks for them. And until they can play 82 games, you got to shake that moniker just a little bit. So I think Caden Gooley is a massive, massive part of this hockey team going forward, especially how he makes that top 4 on the blue line look so much better. He also Lane Hudson has his skill set without question that none of those other guys do, but I think Caden Gooley does as well. His ability to be a lot better than those guys on the penalty kill. His ability to be a little bit meaner, a little bit more physical in and around that blue ice. So I think you got to take your time with that. You've built up these points. And with Kirby Dach, I think the interesting thing here is we saw Bolduc for a little bit. We saw Texier for a little bit. We saw Slav at the beginning of the year. And look, I don't think Texier has looked bad. This is a guy you picked up on waivers. You plugged him in. He's had his moments, little backhand saucer pass to Caulfield in the Carolina game. But I think you said it, Joey, that's not the long-term solution. So I think there's also a spot ready for Kirby Dach on that top line to at least give it a run, but it's got to be when the player is free and clear of injury. There's no need to press anybody into uniform.
And Kent Hughes was actually asked that question, and he did mention that it'll be Martin St. Louis called, but he did say that Suzuki and Caulfield have had success playing with Kirby, or Kirby Dach has had success playing with those other two guys, so he might get an opportunity there. So I thought that point was interesting. They're going to be very cautious. And I don't know if Kent Hughes was playing. I don't know if you saw this, if you watched it, but, somebody, a member of the media asked in French, Kirby Dach was 4 to 6 weeks, and now that we're on week 7, what's taking so long? And he's like, oh, wasn't it 6 to 8 weeks? No, it was 4 to 6 weeks. Oh, okay. Well, I don't even keep track of how many weeks it is. So I was just, it's funny, everybody holds on to these timelines, for dear life, but yeah. What else did I want to go to? The goalie experiment. He says, the 3 goalies is not a long-term play. I think we knew that. But I think the interesting one here, Simon, is the perspective has kind of shifted a little bit because to me, not too long ago, I thought it was going to be slam dunk, Montembeault and Dobesh were going to be the goalies for the Canadiens, and Fowler was going to go down eventually. I don't think that that's different. I think that that's what it'll be. And it's funny, I was listening to Mark Denis on the morning show on Tuesday morning on TSN 690, and he was saying how that's what he would still do, because at the forefront, you want to put Jacob Fowler's development. I thought it was a great, it was a great observation coming from a guy who obviously played goal at a high level, at the highest level. But to me, I don't know that that's so much of a slam dunk. Like, would it totally shock me right now if Jakub Dobeš was the one who ended up going down and they rolled with Fowler and Montembeault? Like, it wouldn't totally shock me. It's not necessarily what I would do. I think Jacob Fowler would have to clearly be better than Jakub Dobeš for that to happen. But he did mention, Ken Hughes said in the press conference, he did mention that, hey, look, we're not going to go with 3 goalies forever. We do have a condensed schedule coming up, but a decision is going to have to be made pretty soon.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it's Dobeš. Dobeš has to be bad and Fowler has to be very good for that to happen. I'm just going to go on the last 2 starts for Sam Montembeault that he finds his way again and he's the regular fixture, or at least 60% of the regular goaltending fixture. And I'm happy Mark Denis said it, right? Because I think us sometimes as fans, you're just so pressed to get to the 2 points. You're so pressed to get to the postseason. You're so pressed to make a playoff run and have the city vibing and all that we forget that at hand here is a guy that you're supposed to hitch your wagon to for the next decade. We can talk about Nick Suzuki and Lane Hudson and Ivan Demidov and Slav and everybody else part of the big picture for the next decade. Without any goaltending, we know how that's going to shape out. It might very well look like it does in Edmonton. So Fowler is a massive piece to this team going forward. And his development, where every once in a while it takes a back seat because we're like, oh, we got to start him because we need these 2 points. We got to start him because we need some good goaltending. The big picture is that you're going to have to find him his minutes and you're going to have to find him his playing time, whether it's in the NHL level or back in Laval. If Dobeš and Fowler, I'm not even going to say on par, Joe. If Dobeš is even slightly behind from a game-to-game perspective, eye test and all those things, I still think you send Fowler back to Laval to get his reps, specifically during the Olympic break, and then you play with your 2 goalie system because somewhere in the conversation needs to be Fowler's development as well.
1,000%. And you can't think, as tempting as it is to think short term, and that's one of the other things, that Kent Hughes said. I mean, it's obvious, via the transactions that they made, but they're not in the same mindset. They're not in the same headspace that they were even a couple of years ago. They're further ahead of where they thought they would be. And so that leads to, win now acquisitions. Like a Phil Deneau acquisition is a win now acquisition. Noah Dobson is a little different because that's on the long term as well. It's win now and long term. But the Deneau acquisition, I think, is, you're admitting that, hey, like, we need a veteran presence, a guy who has 1 year left on his deal. And so, yeah, so I was, but it was obvious. I mean, Ken Hughes didn't have to say it, that they're ahead of schedule, because it's clear that, they made the playoffs last year, and I don't think anybody expected them to make the playoffs last year, but they're ahead of schedule, and obviously was pressed quite a bit on, the type of acquisition, now that when you admit to a room full of reporters that you're ahead of schedule, now it's like, oh, how do you balance, still not being fully where you want to be and then being ahead of schedule. And it's like, well, it's really a case by case thing. And I think that was his point. And I agree with it. Obviously it's case by case. It's who's available, what's the price, what's the contract status, and how old are they? You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's going to come down to, like, for a case by case. So, I think if a deal for a veteran on an expiring contract like Panarin makes sense, Canadians would make that deal. Whereas 3 years ago, it wouldn't have made sense to make that deal. He did mention that in looking, I think Eric Engels got it out of him. He did mention in passing that, if they could go and get a top 6 forward with physicality and playoff experience, or I don't know if it has to be all 3, but a top 6 forward or someone who can bring physicality or someone who brings playoff experience. Ideally, you would have somebody fill in all 3 of those roles instead of having it be 2 guys. But I did find that was kind of interesting that, they're looking for physicality still, and they're looking for some playoff experience and somebody who can score clearly.
Yeah, and I'm wondering also, my most intriguing part of that was that part of the conversation also when they asked about Kapanen and his development and whether he can be
I'm going next. That's where I was going next.
So just to blend that in there, you have to be so overly impressed with what Kapanen has brought. But I still think the search for one of 2 things, depending on when Kirby Dach comes back, and if it works, then you've secured that top line. Can you get an upgrade at that second line center position? Yes. And what does that mean, big picture? It means that you take Oliver Kapanen, who's a wonderful hockey player, and you put him on the third line. And that's where you're excelling. When Oliver Kapanen, who has almost the ability, who does have the abilities to be a second line center, but you have the luxury because you have Nick Suzuki, somebody, and then you have an A-plus third line center, because I don't think Kapanen is an A-plus second line center. He's a good hockey player. He doesn't get lost out there, and all the positive we have to say about him, it's all there. But how good would this team look if you still upgraded that spot, and then you go to Kapanen as an A-plus third-line center, and then Danault and Evans, one of them plays line, and you have an A-plus fourth-line center. That's when I think that's where there's still work to be done. So when he made the comments about Kapanen being a second-line center, I don't think that means that if an opportunity arises for him to upgrade at that spot and at that wing spot on the top line, that Ken Hughes won't make that deal.
No, but I do think that the way Kapanen has meshed with Demidov in particular, and I know Slavkovsky's been brilliant, but the way that those two have meshed all season, they've played together longer than Slavkovsky's played with him. And that's why I say that. I do think the way Kapanen's played has bought Kent Hughes, I don't want to say time, but it's bought him, you can play another card, whereas if you don't have a center, now you're absolutely looking for a center. If you don't have Kapanen playing the way he's playing, well, your biggest hole's at center. Now, with the way Kapanen's playing, and the premium that's placed on centers, and the cost of center is always going to be high, and they're hard to get. They're not necessarily readily available to you. You can focus elsewhere on improving your roster, because you have somebody who maybe isn't the ideal 2C, but somebody who can be 2C this year and probably beyond. But it doesn't force you into, if I want to upgrade, I absolutely need to be at center because I have a hole there. That's what Kapanen does.
There's no reason to overpay now. That's what it is.
I mean, if you can go get the right guy who's going to be here long term, yeah, you go out there and get it. I also think Kent Hughes realizes, the Phil Danault trade and the comment about Kapanen, I think he realizes that unless it falls from the sky or something big changes, I don't think he's going to get that. I don't think, even if he wanted to, I don't think he's going to get that second line center, that ideal second line center, because those guys are just tough to get.
He also said, Joey, that he expects, with the parity in the National Hockey League now, he expects it to be a very quiet deadline. And I agree with him. If I don't have the standings in front of me here, but let's just say the season was to end in a month from now, how many teams are out of it?
Yeah.
Everybody's in it. The Leafs are at the bottom of the Eastern standings. I don't think they're going to be sellers. The Columbus Blue Jackets are 6-7 points out of the wild card spot. The teams are not going to be on sell mode like they've been, and I think this is something that NHL fans should get accustomed to. This is the NHL that Gary Bettman wanted. He wanted parity throughout the league, and it looks like that's exactly what he's getting.
And I know it's funny, I saw this go across X, to your point, where people are like, well, those teams that are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, those teams that have a chance to make the playoffs but are not really Stanley Cup contenders, those are the teams that should realize that, hey, if you trade, your value, your asset is going to have a higher value, supply, demand. Yeah, that's all well and good. But the bottom line is that jobs are on the line. There's general manager jobs on the line. There's coaching jobs on the line. So if you're sitting in 10 and you're like, man, there's no sellers, and I think we can make the playoffs, but I don't think we can win a Stanley Cup, and you miss the playoffs because you're off selling, it's going to be a tough sell to your owner to be like, hey, yeah, we're going to come back. Now, if you have the green light and you have the blessing of your owner, be like, hey, you know what, you're going to stick around, we're going to retool, we're going to figure it out on the fly. But even then, I mean, if you're part of a rebuild and you lose 2, 3, 4 years in a row, and things are not looking good, it's like, from Chris Drury's perspective, the Rangers are on the outside looking in, then they're inside out, outside in. It's like, okay, Panarin maybe he's going elsewhere on July 1st. But if I have an opportunity to go out there and make a wild card spot, you never know, maybe I went around. Are you not better off than trading off Panarin and definitely missing the playoffs, and all of a sudden the seat gets hot and it's tough? I get it. If you agree to sell, your assets are worth more because there's less sellers. But the problem is your job's on the line.
Yeah,
that's the tricky part.
I just wanted to pull out the standings because I saw the highlights yesterday on TSN that the Seattle taking it to the Flames and saw the highlights, and they're on a heater. Joey, 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, when we were doing one of these podcasts, Seattle Kraken were probably in the conversation of sellers. Today, they sit 1 point behind the Vegas Golden Knights atop the Pacific Division. They're 1 point behind the Oilers with 2 games in hand. That's what 10 days can make. So it's going to be hard-pressed to find me somebody who's going to say that they're willing to tap out. Look, I'm just looking at the standings now. The Blackhawks are 4 points out. What are they selling?
Yeah.
The general manager is going to be like you. Like, we're going to be like the Habs last year. Like, well, no, we'll take the 8th pot. We'll play a round of hockey. Owner makes money. Everybody makes money. We feel good about ourselves as an organization before they start selling off assets. Predators. We had so many conversations about Stamkos, Jonathan Marchand show, Ryan O'Reilly. They went on a bit of a heater. They're back in the playoff picture. So I don't know where the help's going to come from. But if you're lucky enough to be one of these terrible teams, or one that has the blessings of the owner and the general manager to go out there and sell, then you might be able to get a lot for certain assets.
Is it cold where you are?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm just preparing for a Saturday.
Man.
I have I'm going to bed with it. I haven't taken it off in 2 days.
Nice, man.
Shower with it.
Oh, yeah?
It's playoffs day, Joey. It's not a joke.
No, I got it. I figured it out. I got it. So I know it's playoffs.
This is serious.
We'll talk. We'll have our an episode focused on the NFL tomorrow. Comes out on Thursday. So that's it. Tsalikis, be good, man. Bear down, man.
All right, Joey. Talk to you soon.
All right, that's Simon Tsalikis. I'm Joey Alfieri. It's a Sports Dép Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and we'll be back on the Sports Dép Podcast I'm not going to say 24 hours time, but we'll be back tomorrow. And a reminder, on Friday, we'll actually be speaking to former Montreal Canadiens forward Pierre Dagenet. And Simon, you promise you're going to ask him about Saku Koivu-Mike Ribeiro's relationship?
How good that relationship was. How much they got along.
All right. So that's coming on the show on Friday. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and we'll be back again tomorrow.